Chapter 6, Freedom versus Determinism. Free will and determinism go to the heart of many philosophical, sociological, psychological, economic, and cultural theories and worldviews, and are certainly central to any conception of morality. Now, free will appears to separate us from nature, and yet much recent science suggests that this simply isn't so. Causality is a central concept in this chapter. Now, first of all, the meaning of determinism. Determinism, right off the bat, means universal causation. The same thing that for every effect, event, or occurrence in reality, a cause or causes exists. There is no such thing under the idea of determinism as an uncaused event. Determinism holds serious implications for morality. If it's true, if there are no uncaused events, how can we hold people responsible for what they can't help doing? How can we tell people what they should or ought to do if they're programmed or predetermined to act in the ways that they do? How can we praise them? How can we blame them or reward or punish people if they can't help acting in the ways that they do? That is a serious problem with determinism. Now, there are different types of determinism. First of all, religious determinism. Another term for this would be predestination, and it is the theory that if God is all-powerful and all-knowing, or omniscient and omnipresent, omnipotent, then he must have predestined everything that occurs. This theory derives from the attributes of God, Allah, whatever you want to call him, or I guess her. God determines the course of events. Now, in theology, or at least in Christian theology, free will, or Arminianism, versus predestination, Calvinism. That is what the name of this particular debate would be called. Theories and types of determinism. Some problems, of course, with religious determinism. The idea raises, apart from huge issues of proof, the problem of evil and the equally thorny issue of salvation. How do you prove that such a being exists? And if he does exist, that he's all-powerful and all-knowing and has predestined everything? Again, I am not taking a stand here and saying there is no God or that there is a God. I'm saying, how do you prove it? Now, faith requires no proof, and so for people of faith, this simply isn't an issue. And then again, another problem, most theories of salvation require some kind of free will. Otherwise, you have, excuse me a second, the sun is just really putting a glare on the old melon here, isn't it? I hope that's better. So, salvation. How does it affect the idea of religious determinism? Then there's scientific determinism. Physical determinism arose from the discoveries in the physical science. Newton theorized that everything in reality is basically material or physical in nature and is therefore completely determined by natural laws, such as the law of gravity. Science is founded on universal causation, and such causation means that there is no freedom, at least under the auspices of physical determinism. Now, Newton, Sir Isaac Newton, 1642 to 1727, the inventor of the fig Newton, or not. not really. He's not the inventor of the fig Newton. Is the greatest proponent of physical determinism. Now, according to his theories, the government, the universe is governed by mechanical laws. Now, human beings, being part of that universe, are governed by the same mechanical laws. Now, some argue that humans are not just physical, and they question physics that suggest a freedom at any level, even at the atomic or the molecular level. Some problems with scientific determinism is that natural law states probabilities, not certainties, and that modern physics has raised serious doubts about Newtonian physics. The next type of determinism we want to talk about is biologic and genetic, Darwinian determinism. Now, Charles Darwin, 1809 to 1882, argued that species evolved through the selection of the fittest. Now, according to Thoreau, modern genetics complements this theory. Problem is that Darwinian evolution has been largely disproven. No, I'm not even going into the creation versus evolution debate. I'm simply saying that Darwin himself said that within 100 years, evolution would prove, or his form of evolution would prove itself through the fossil record, and that simply hasn't happened. They have never discovered any evidence of any missing link or so-called missing link. The newest evolution, the theory of evolution, talks about punctuated equilibrium, which says that evolution is a very long and slow process, but that every so often, boom, in the blink of an eye, changes occur, which is neither here nor there, but that is where they're at now. So Darwin's theories that species evolve by means of natural selection and that only the fittest survive led to a belief that nature determines human beings. Now, this aspect of Darwinian evolution certainly is still in vogue today. Human beings, according to this, are totally determined by their genetic makeup, over which they have no control at all. This is where I think Thoreau was talking about modern genetics complementing the theory, because that is, it seems to be anyway, where science is heading. We are totally the sum total of our genetic makeup, our DNA, our RNA, and that would determine everything about us. Not everyone agrees with this, but this is where I think Thoreau was going. Some problems with this theory is both physical and biological determinism leave no room at all for a mental or a spiritual side to our existence. That being so, can you adopt a hybrid position? These two ideas reduce human beings strictly to physical. Sociocultural determinism. Historical or cultural determinism arose from the theories of George Hegel. Hegel, 1770 to 1831, believed that world history is a manifestation of an absolute mind realizing itself. It stresses that character and action are completely determined by culture, and certainly I think any of us would say, well, there's a lot of truth to that. Hegel, as an atheist, it's interesting to me that he is able to say that there is no creator God, and yet he replaces that creator God with an absolute mind realizing itself. What is an absolute mind realizing itself other than a God? It manifests itself through history. So history would be Hegel's idea of God. Human beings, therefore, are completely determined by their past and present history and cultures. Problems. It's difficult, again, to prove the existence of both an absolute mind or that a mind could even exist without a body. It's the same thing that when we talk about religious determinism. And then other theories are just as plausible, if not more so. Um, Culture certainly may influence. In fact, I think we could say culture does influence, but may not fully determine actions. Then there's economic determinism, or social determinism, arose from the theories of Karl Marx. You've all heard of Karl Marx. Marx says that human beings are determined by economic class struggles that will inevitably lead to a classless society. More and more as I get older, I think we are there. We're in a society that has no class whatsoever. Now, Marx followed Hegel. The ideas are similar. However, he argued that history is determined economically and socially. People are determined by class. Um, do we have a class system in America? Usually I have quite a rousing debate in class with that question. And the answer is we say that we have no aristocracy, but the fact is that we have elevated celebrities almost to this level. And further, what about the Kennedys? What about the Rockefellers, the Hiltons? I mean, these people certainly would consider themselves aristocracy within our culture. Now, we don't recognize a class system, and certainly we have something that truly helps us transcend whatever class that we're born into, and that would be education. You can be anything that you want to be, provided that you're able to obtain the education necessary to get where you want to go. And that is one thing that is unique about the United States, that you are not limited to the class that you're born into. Now, some problems with economic determinism. The theory is based on unproved assumptions. Have we had class struggles? Well, yes, but not to the level that other cultures might have had. Do we have a classless society? And the answer is no, we don't. There are classes throughout the world. And so it either hasn't occurred yet or it's simply not going to happen. And other theories are equally plausible. And other non-economic influences exist as well. The world is not the sum total of our economics. Then there's psychological determinism. Psychological determinism arose out of the work of Freud and the behaviorists. Sigmund Freud, 1856 to 1939, argued that human beings are determined by unconscious desires that cultures repress and or distort. Freud caused quite a stir in the world with his theories. It's starting to make this resurgence today, but Freudian psychoanalysis was largely discredited because, when you do a scientific sample, it's supposed to be based on a wide and diverse source. Freud did all of his work on middle-aged Victorian Austrian women, Viennese. How do you base logical theoretical conclusions on such a limited base? And that's the question that has been asked. Freudian psychology maintains that human beings are affected by these unconscious desires, these unconscious drives. Your early childhood determines the course of your entire adult life. The main criticism of this theory is that it's too generalized to have any real basis in fact. Now, there's another type of psychological determinism based on the work of B.F. Skinner and the school that followed him, the behaviorists. And this maintains that human beings are completely physical beings whose development is totally determined by those external stimuli provided by their physical and cultural environments. Now, it significantly argues from observed behavior rather than from psychological dynamics. Skinner, who lived from 1904 to 1990, argued that human behavior is argued by conditioning and environment, both physical and social. And we all know that this is true to some degree, to maybe even a great degree. But there are problems. It's based on a completely materialistic view of human beings, which doesn't stand up to evidence or argument. And like Freud's theories, it goes too far in its claims, using the validity of operant conditioning in some instances as a basis for claiming its validity in all instances. Now, conditioning certainly works, and it under certain circumstances, but does it work all the time? Listen, we all know someone whose birth or their socioeconomic circumstances should have soured them, should have caused them, according to Skinner's theories, to go deeply into a life of crime. And yet, we know people that this simply didn't happen to. Kind of like the idea of ethical egoism, saying that I will always act in my own best interest, the strong form. We all know that people don't always act in their own best interest. And so it's difficult in the stronger forms to substantiate. Hard determinism is that we're getting now back to the idea of determinism per se, not all of the offshoots. And it is the theory that all events are caused, but that some events and causes originate with human beings. The hard determinist criticizes the soft determinist by questioning how human beings can be said to originate any events when, if one traces causes back far enough, they end up being outside of the control of human beings. Everything is caused. There is no free will whatsoever under the idea of hard determinism. Humans can change the future, but this is a result of their own personal makeup or environment, not of a free choice. Soft determinism is a reaction to hard determinism, and it maintains that there is universal causation, but unlike hard determinists, they believe that some of this causation originates with human beings themselves, thus giving meaning to the phrase human freedom. Everything is caused, but some events are caused by humans by means of their own minds or their own wills. Thus, one is neither completely free or determined. Freedom is limited because humans originate only some causes, but they are determined by others. Indeterminism. Indeterminist, and William James, the author who lived from 1842 to 1910, is the most prominent proponent of this view. And indeterminists maintain that there is a certain amount of chance in the world, that not everything is caused. James says that he desires that there, by novelty and spontaneity in the world, allowing human beings to be free and creative. James feels that our strivings for good over bad and our regrets over bad deeds mean that we must be free. In other words, the very fact that we understand our own nature must mean that we have some freedom, that not everything is determined. Now, there are problems. It seems to be based upon wishful thinking rather than upon evidence or logical argument. There's a little evidence to suggest that uncaused events exist. If some events are totally uncaused, then they are not caused by anything or anybody. Therefore, indeterminism is no guarantee of human freedom, only of chance. And again, if acts are uncaused or indeterminate, then nobody could be said to be responsible for them. Criticisms of hard determinism and some arguments for free will. Hard determinists push language out of context. Their arguments don't account for the complexity of the nature of human beings. Like the psychological egoist, they try to reduce what is fact really uh, to something simple. And this reductionism doesn't work. You're trying to force a square peg into a round hole. For hard determinists, morality is simply an illusion. Now, Hospers argues that we can free ourselves of certain desires. An alcoholic can become dry. We can quit smoking, etc. If this is true, according to Hospers, how can hard determinism be true? Human minds and human perceptions are open-ended and creative. Humans create their experience of the world. Hard determinism ignores the complexity of human beings and reduces, for example, consciousness to physical phenomenon. Humans are active seekers and creators. They are not mere passive receivers of sense experience. Listen, there are levels of differences within the world. For instance, rocks have nothing. They have no self-will. They have no way of knowing anything or doing anything to change the future. Plants, they are alive. They're not sentient and they don't seem to be able to control anything. Animals don't have the level of sentience that a human has, and yet you could clearly make a case that animals do feel some emotion. They feel pain, they feel affection. In humans, the further up the evolutionary scale that one travels, the more freedom or choice seems to increase. Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, 1905 to 1980, the father of existentialism, argued that humans are confronted by freedom in that consciousness intends and creates experience. We make choices in relation to situations that may be determined. For example, how we choose to live in relation to those things that may be determined for us. We always have a choice. We don't always like the choice that we're given. For instance, you have the choice of whether to complete your homework or not. Now, you say, well, if I don't complete my homework, then I'll fail, and all this money that I spent will be for nothing. Well, it's still a conscious choice. It's a decision on your part to do your homework, to participate in the class. But you do have a choice. You don't like the consequences that go with the choice, but you have one. Some criticisms of hard determinism and arguments for freedom continued. Soft determinism seems to be the only tenable position. Acceptance of this position allows us to assign moral responsibility to human beings and to praise, blame, reward, or punish them when and if it is justifiable to do so. Again, soft determinism appears to be our best alternative. Freedom is limited by external factors of all sorts, but we are free to choose or choose not to choose how we respond to them, to act or not to act in relation to them. Thus, it makes sense to assign moral responsibility to human beings and to praise, blame, and reward them. Well, that concludes the lecture for Chapter 6. Again, we blew through this very quickly. Read Chapter 6 thoroughly. We watch the lecture, use the PowerPoint slides, and again, contact me with questions or comments, and have a great day.